colleagues. I hope you've enjoyed lunch. For those of you here and those of you watching online, that you had a chance to finally to break. I know we pack in a lot of content at Automotive Logistics and Supply Chain Global Live. Barely give you time to eat, or at least to do it simultaneously, but that's the world we live in now. Things never stop. I hope you've enjoying it so far. For anybody just joining us, perhaps especially live virtually, I'm Christopher Ludwig, Editor-in-Chief here at Automotive Logistics, and our pleasure to welcome everybody to this event, and indeed to this session, which I think is, again, coming down to some really critical issues across the supply chain. Tier 1 suppliers are in many ways at the sharp end of the ongoing disruption as well as changes we're seeing in the supply chain, whether it's coordinating supply from volatile suppliers all around the world, tier 2s, tier 3, where it's not always so easy from a visibility point of view, or obviously managing customer supply chains, directed supply, not always in control of your own destiny. But nonetheless, I also think the tier 1 supply chain is one of the most exciting areas, not just because of the disruption, but also because so many changes we see happening in the industry mean more value going to many tier 1s, more areas of responsibility, new areas of responsibility, and new dynamics in the market. And that, of course, has lots of implications for the supply chain and for the logistics that suit that. And so we have a panel this afternoon that brings together multiple parts of the parts supplier chain, including on the OE side, as well as aftermarket and after sales, and also from the logistics, international logistics point of view. I'm going to bring them up and introduce them. I'm pleased to welcome Maxim Serov, who is the Supply Chain Management Director for North America Operations at Benteler, key tier 1 here. Maxim, very good to have you. Thank you very much. Yeah, thanks for joining us. Yes, please. Round of applause. Also want to welcome Matt Pohlman, Vice President of Supply Chain Operations at the First Brands Group. That's a diversified group. We'll hear a little bit more, serving both on the OE side and aftermarket. Matt, so good to have you here and back. Matt has also had quite a career across many other tier suppliers, and we'll hear about. Thank you, Matt. And last but not least, again, the brave of Maersk coming and bearing many questions. Michael Andersen, who's the Vice President, Automotive Vertical at North America.
Thank you. I guess I'll be the second bravest
you
behind
will be the
my
second
colleague.
One. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Once again, we'll be doing Q&A, but for anybody watching live, I will monitor the live Q&A panel and put them to our panelists as much as possible. You in the room can either ask the questions via app or put a hand up, and we'll get you can move to one of the mics and speak there too. But let's kick off. So we know, for those of you who've been here all day, we've been talking plenty about the various disruptions in the supply chain right now and the impacts of that. So we don't necessarily need to rehash history of it, but what would you put down as your really top priority for managing and mitigating this risk right now? And Maxim, I'll start with you.
Well, basically, from my perspective, the top priority at the moment is really to get the parts in the right time, in the right quantity, and at a reasonable cost. So this is as simple as that. So unfortunately, since the beginning of 2020, the international trade continuously disrupted, first by COVID. We had to shut down economies, when we had to restart economies, then the international international freight crisis arrived, triggered by unprecedented volumes in the US. Then the lack of materials, we are talking about the steel, we are talking about the rubber, we are talking about semiconductors, port congestions, restrictions related to COVID again. So, and this list can be continued. So, of course, all these negative impacts created, from my point of view, unhealthy situation and unhealthy competition on the market, which, of course, followed by the double digits rate increase. So this is the priority from my point of view. Yeah. As simple as that.
Yeah, absolutely. Matt, you've recently joined First Brands Group, so maybe it'll make a bit of sense to contextualize a little bit what parts of the business you're looking at and what some of those top priorities are.
You said it earlier, but at First Brands, we were primarily an aftermarket company, but we have an OE base as well. A lot of our brands, Fram, Trico, have a large presence. And I would say to my biggest challenge, or the thing that keeps me up every day, is just how do we service the customer? And there's so many things every day. It seems like there's a different challenge that prevents me from doing what I've been hired to do, and that's provide, parts to our customers when they order it on time, right? And so we have challenges with fill rates and costs, and like everything Maxim said. But and we're trying to figure out how do we get better visibility to where all those pieces are in the network? How do we communicate what the increases in schedules are? One of the challenges we have right now is what's a customer schedule? Because I believe right now with customers and our fill rates and some of the challenges, the customers are ordering more. Some of that's a false order. It's a real order, but it's they're buffering, and I'm buffering, they're buffering, everyone's buffering the system. And what do I really need to provide when? And how do I get it there on time at low cost and all those other pieces? But my biggest issue is improving the availability of material to our customers at the lower cost.
Michael, you've heard the priorities there. Perhaps not surprises, they're down to the essentials of it, but they're just not so easy to address from Maersk's point of view. We heard some obviously from John earlier, but what would you add to that in terms of priorities, perhaps especially from the North America point of view where you're responsible?
Yeah, absolutely. So whether you look at Maersk or you look at all of the steamship lines, it's a fixed network, so the capacity is limited. It's reached and it's beyond its capacity. And I think what it's forcing us to do, all of us, and with the presentations earlier today, weaving them together, you hear a common thread that we're having to rethink and replan because there's a lot more variables, inventory levels, the semiconductor chips, everything we've heard so far. It's forcing us really to rethink in terms of looking all the way back to where origin and where the supply is coming from. So what I see anyway with Maersk is our fleet, you can ring fence with the exception of adding eco ships in the next year. But Maersk's focus is really to partner with customers long term and to look at really how do we almost, I hear partnership, but collaborate and kind of spar a little bit on how we make the changes that we need to make. A lot of people are saying, okay, what's your crystal ball saying? Are we going to have the steamship lines go back to normal? ILWU coming up next July. My opinion would be that even though those things, if they do not provide a distraction or if they do continue to make this situation as it is, it's not really going to matter. We have to kind of collaboratively between the tier ones, the OEMs, we've got to kind of get over the top of it and really start to plan back at origin safety stock. But there is a what-if stock factor too that kind of has to be integrated into what we do going forward to have our new normal.
Yeah, absolutely. Maxim, Matt, start with you on this. I mean, again, we're talking a lot about that instability and overseas supply, longer, less predictable. What can tier ones do much to respond to mitigate some of this? I mean, yes, there's expedited options and things that become a necessity at a certain point. But are there other things you're doing, whether it's with your suppliers, logistics providers, to try to mitigate some of this?
Yes. Yeah, the lead times increased significantly, especially for the ocean freight. And basically starting from Q4 2020, the situation was worsening step by step. And I think it was crucial for suppliers to recognize the new reality as early as possible and to implement changes into the processes. So at some locations, we at Benteler implemented, for example, transit time adjustment in 3 phases following the market development. But all in all, the schedule reliability, as I think you were discussing that already, so it's very low right now. It's between 35–40%, maybe even lower right now because it's kind of changing. So and this represents the significant delays. So it's about 7–8 delays in average right now. What is really killing us is volatility. So the container can come with 3 days delay and can come with 23 days delay. So and this is the big issue. So what we are doing, so first of all, we are working with our service providers. So I think that efficient communication, professionalism are the key in this difficult situation. Second, we are working with the data. So this is important as well. So we are analyzing actual transit time lane by lane and then comparing with the SAP data. Because so if this is not matching, in this volatile environment, then you are in trouble. So we are working and analyzing the carrier performance. So we know that the carrier by carrier is different, and the performance is different, of course. The service cost sometimes more expensive, sometimes less expensive. So somehow we need to find the right balance between these two. We are trying to mitigate the risks and working with using the different services. So yeah, that kind of things, of course. And if we are talking about the strategic things, I think that we really need to think about local for local, because I think I mentioned that in one of our sessions a year ago that, for example, we at Benteler, we are sourcing a lot from overseas. So up to 25% of the purchase value comes from Europe or Asia. So, and I think this is too much, and basically this is a favor win in this difficult situation right now.
Absolutely. Matt, would you add anything to that?
Yeah, he covered it quite well. I think communications with your customers, data, analytics, understanding where that is, having information where things are in the value stream is more important now than ever. But everyone's having to put buffer inventory in because depending on where you're getting stuff in, but it's taken twice as long now as what it did, not too long ago, and it's taken twice to 3 times as much more money to move it. And oftentimes, what you used to think you could do quite quickly, now you can make the decision quickly, but it might take 3 weeks for it to get put on a boat or something like that. So there's just the only way right now to buffer that is to buffer that with inventory, understand your customer requirements. We're looking at our existing inventory. What do we have? In the aftermarket, you have a bit more flexibility. This part can act as several other parts, and you might have it boxed in 2 or 3 different brands, and you can rebox things and rework things and unkit things or kit things to make something that you have too much of into something else. So there's that flexibility to do that, and you have to have data, and you got to have people that just are willing to continue to have that information and will be willing to open it up and then again communicating to customers and whatnot. But Maxim said it very well. The lengthening lead times and the value stream is crushing all of us at the moment.
Mm-hmm. And we'll talk a little bit more about how that, as Maxim alluded to, could or would shift the supply chain more local for local. But Michael, you've heard again the points there. What can a logistics provider, Maersk or other, do to help specifically tier suppliers really improve that planning, given that volatility in scheduling that we have?
Yeah, I think that the key back again is to look at there's obviously a menu of service offerings that every provider has, and you can continue to work on that and optimize those. Realizing if you stretch the rubber band to accommodate a certain client, the cost can go up and things can change. But if you go ahead and go back, and I think it comes to the origin and what he was saying about the parts, making sure you've got the right parts, you almost have to, especially in the current environment, be able to pick what's getting on the vessel or mode of transport, be it air or however, to come up with the right parts coming in, as prioritizing those things. Maersk is not to commercial too much, but there's a software and predictive analytics, inventory management and visibility called NeoNav that we're sitting down, and I meant that collaboration really has to happen, because the menu of services, you've got to kind of blend them to come up with the solutions in this. I mean, as a carrier, I can come up with a way to block stow and to get something in an accelerated lane out of the port, but that still may not alleviate downstream warehouse and bottlenecks that there. But it all starts really at wherever the origin happens to be. I think nearshoring, somebody mentioned that in one of the earlier presentations, especially in the aftermarket space with Mexico being in close proximity, that's probably going to come back into play. So with our new strategy, so integrative container logistics, that's end to end, and that's going to be on us to go ahead and build out the infrastructure on both the origin sides and the destination to augment the network.
Mm-hmm. Maxim, I'm sure this is perhaps part of the things you're looking at with the providers, as you said. But are you varying your frequencies and volumes on the shipping side as much as you can to sort of mitigate where you can get the sailing to maximize or things like that?
Well, in general, if we're talking about the planning, right? If we're talking about the planning, I think that the most common phrase, and I've heard here this phrase several times, is a crystal ball, right? I think at the moment the tier 1 suppliers are having a hard time to somehow to make a planning and to find the right balance between the finished good planning and the material planning. So on the one side, we have big volatility from the customer side. So on another hand, we have long lead times, frozen periods with the tier 2, tier 3 suppliers. And on top of that, we are losing flexibility, having lack of equipment, and I mean containers, for example, and vessels, etc. So this is a really difficult situation. So yeah, what we are doing here in Benteler, so we are trying to reinforce the processes of sales and operation planning, of course. So on the weekly or even daily basis, we are checking what the customer needs, how the customer demand changed. So trying to understand the customer behavior, and then to somehow to communicate these changes to the tier 2 suppliers and the service providers. If your question was about the frequency, if we're adjusting the frequency, yes, of course. In the end of the day, we have to follow the customer demand. So, I mean, we have to bring the part from A to B according to the customer demand. So, sure, if the volume goes up, we can look for a full container load, right? So, which is a little bit cheaper. If the volume goes down, we can look for the milk run options if we're talking about land freight. So, there are definitely a few options available. So, we are trying to do that, somehow to mitigate and optimize the cost for sure.
And Matt, maybe turning to the aftermarket side, I mean, obviously in the vehicle side, we see the impacts on production as well with stoppages, and now feeding down to sales dropping because the inventory isn't there. Is it getting to that stage in aftermarket? Are you seeing in the distribution side the constraints in the supply chain start to affect the service ratio and even sales at a certain point, or is there still kind of some room to buffer on that?
No, there's no room. There's no room. It's crazy. It's speed of containers and different things like that. Sometimes we're just saying we got suppliers that are responsible for shipping their own freight, and they can't find lanes to get it on, so they're calling us, and we're calling people and getting lanes. And sometimes we're just we're just reaching out. Who has lanes? And okay, I'll ship it from this point to that point to get it on there. It's kind of like whack-a-mole almost. But I mean, we're always just playing it. But we have disruptions in our supply chain. We do, we have congestion significantly at ports. You do certain things and try to anticipate what's going to come out. You're trying to, we're moving a lot of stuff, say, into a Chicago, D.C. that flows through L.A. It's the port's messed up, as everyone knows. You're trying to get it out of there. It's supposed to go down a rail. I'm trying to take it off the rail because I can put it on a truck and get it there faster. It takes a lot more cost to that. But we're doing all of those things to try to get product in to keep the fill rate or our commitments up. But it's, we're challenging and chasing different avenues every day. We've got to be agile to what's coming available. I don't know what container is going to come off first and what's on it. So how do I know what's on it? How desperately do I need that, right? So can I put it on, keep it on a train? Can I go on a truck, fast truck? All those things. So we're reaching out to our providers. How can they help? How do they help us? We're reaching out to new suppliers or new providers asking for help. So, First Brands is a relatively new group. We don't have a long history. Our brands are 100 years old, but the company itself is new. So we're also trying to do things like, consolidating all of our companies to one freight spend and do global ocean bids, which seem normal, but to these 10 or 15 different companies, they were all 10 different companies. Now we're trying to put common spend and common volume, common approaches to things, and it will get there, but it's a journey. But there's just disruption after disruption that's not making it easy anymore.
Michael, in the last session, John talked about varying transport mode almost mid-flow, for example, in Dubai, to switch off from, to different mode. In North America, are there similar examples right now that you're doing to whether it's different ports of access or however you can do, and would you share an example?
Yeah, there are. I mean, really, one client put it, that we met with recently in the Seattle area, that he's trying just any point of entry in the U.S. to flow the goods. So, West Coast, we've added a new transload facility, kind of in partnership with CN, up in Vancouver to bring transload ocean freight and bring it down into we've got major OEM clients that are supporting that. So on the ocean side, we're looking for ways, alternative ports. A client earlier in the week asked us, Automotive OEM, what about the ILWU? Are there any contingencies through Mexico and possible routing? So we're taking those things back. So from the standard container Maersk line shipping, we're looking for anything that we can to optimize the situation. I do think, because we made the jokes at the beginning about the bravest person to sit up here. There was an article in Bloomberg 2 weeks ago, and there was a bar chart in there that basically showed our peers and then Maersk's margins. Everyone's margins are up, no doubt, but our margins are not up. We're less than our peers, and that is not to be a bragging point, but that's to us our long-term strategy, because we're looking to partner long-term to not only sign a long-term ocean contract, but we also can look at your business, as the new Maersk talking, in logistics and visibility. And a lot of the presentations today have talked about that, because if I can get the visibility, I can make the change and get the supplier. And opinion, we're going to have to get those lead times down. The suppliers are going to have to be managed better at origin, or to optimize that and make sure that we're getting in the containers what we want when we need it, considering all the downstream disruption that we've got. So I guess I'm sounding a little bit like a broken record, but visibility and actual true visibility of what's coming, what's there, what are we loading, and what's going to get on. Because if we can do some things on the vessel, then once we get to port, we can pull containers off express or another commercial for Maersk. But Maersk Accelerate, where once it comes into the port, it can follow another mode, be it air freight or truck or direct hotshot trucking, whatever the need is to expedite. But once it gets on that vessel, it's kind of hard to do, to make any planning, both what's in the box and then what's coming. So,
as you raise that, Michael, it makes me perhaps to ask Maxim and Matt a little bit in terms of the logistics partnerships and arrangements that you have, be that 3PL model, LLP model, or however. Because as Michael said there's a partnership piece, I think, that requires some longer term commitments on both sides. And I'm just curious, is one, how you're working on things now, and perhaps it's not one story for all, given as you just outlined, Matt, with consolidating brands and groups together. And are you looking at this in any kind of different ways in the context of what we're seeing today? Maxim, I'll start with you.
Again, if we're talking about the ocean freight, right? So
yeah, we can start with that. Maybe we start with that since it's
for the ocean freight. So my first point is that there are not so many options available, I would say, on the market right now. So if we're talking about the freight from North Europe to East Coast, so we have a few services which are served by 3 or 4 shipping lines. And historically, if you take a look on the data, so some of them are quite poor, so automatically it's not a good option for automotive business. So then you end up with a few services, and everyone is fighting for that. So I think that that's triggers, of course, the huge demand for these lanes. So I think this must change a little bit. So regarding the partnership with the service providers, definitely we are working with them. So from our side, so the key is the communication, like we discussed, and we are trying to provide, let's say, the long-term reliable forecast for our volume, just to make sure that we have space on the vessel. So this communication between the tier 1 and the service provider is absolutely crucial from my point of view.
And Matt, I mean, perhaps the ocean side is a similar story there. As said, the options are fairly limited. But so if you can comment on that, but then also, as you're looking at your network in North America, with this attempt to bring certain parts together, how do you see partnership with logistics providers serving that?
Okay. We need help with providers, right? We've had too many, and we're trying to bring that together and try to get some common ground and some relationships with suppliers on that. We need to be able to say, here's our standard volume, and I always need this much each week or this month, and be able to rely on somebody that can provide that. I think that works both ways for everybody to have that consistent piece. And then trying to also understand the spikes, what's driving the spikes and availability and those things. And then can you give that to your existing supplier, or do you have to plan B and plan C type of thing? Right now, in many cases, because of the volume and because of reaching out, we're just taking anybody that comes to play. And sometimes those have been bad decisions. They get there much longer than you think. So it's just not, you can't ask, do you have a couple of containers available? Can you get them on there? Because you might be last in line when you get to someplace else that you're going. So you got to be real careful. But domestically, we are working with a lot of new suppliers, and we're changing our network. So we're going to be changing the flow of material as we consolidate many locations into one. There'll be a lot of consolidation. We just started a TMS, so that's given us a lot of great information. We're about halfway along in our implementation with Transplace TMS that we're using for that, and that's going quite well at the moment. And so I mean, we'll get a lot of information from that allow us to make better outbound decisions as well as inbound decisions. We are resourcing stuff to Mexico, as was mentioned earlier. That will also help. That's a much longer term plan, but as you do that, you've got different sources of supply that you're getting material locally. You start out with it far, you got to localize it, and then and those other pieces. But that's the nice thing about local for local is your value stream is much closer, it's much faster, your response time is much quicker, and all the benefits that come from that. We have much less issues with our local supply versus our imported material.
So you both have mentioned local for local. So perhaps just to follow up on that, as we mentioned in a few other sessions today, these things don't happen in an overnight. The transitions take some time. But is it sort of clear now, would you say, in your organizations that with the price of logistics, the risk, et cetera, playing a bigger role, that it's influencing, or it will be influencing those decisions more? Do you feel that there's a seat at the table, if you like, for making those decisions? Maybe I'll start with you again there, Matt.
I think it's just challenging, right? Because every part's has a different story to it. Is it a new OE part? Is it an aftermarket part? There's a lot of different things. Are you chasing price? Or there's a lot of different things that can get considered into that piece. But clearly, if you can make it local, if you can make it for OE and for aftermarket local, that's ideal. That would be the best. I think there is a market for that. You have to look at the competitive threats, and so many things can change that. Tariffs and all of the extra.
No, so basically I agree. So from the regional perspective, definitely we would like and we are requesting localization. So we are working with purchasing department on that. To minimize the risk, the disruptions, the cost, etc. On the global level, the picture could be a little bit different because we are the global company, we have global contracts. So, but I think this is what we definitely need to think about.
Absolutely. I want to just turn to one of the questions that have come in via the app. Well, there's two that have come in, but I'll go to the one that came in earlier. What innovations or other innovations that you're seeing as a result in transportation are you seeing as a result of the market crisis. So maybe I'll start actually with you there, Michael.
Sure. Well, one of the things that it hasn't been talked about a great deal so far, but it is definitely part of the gridlock is the equipment and containers. So there are some in our industry that have held containers and chassis because they need to build the inventory. They don't have warehousing space or place to put it. So that's caused not only aggravating their own supply chain, but those around, because if the equipment's not freed up, we can't get it back to origin and keep things moving. So I mean, one solution for that is we came and created a depot. So we're at least unloading the containers from the chassis, freeing those up, and then trying to flow based on what's inside to the manufacturing as that. But I just sound like a broken record, but I think we have to clear that and the space and so forth. Working our way back to origin is ultimately going to be the solution here. And I don't know if we're ever going to go back to a commodity approach. And when you mentioned price, I mean that price is always important, but really the solution and the service, my opinion is that that'll derive the optimization that you're able to get and the quantified savings as an LLP partnering is going to be what is ultimately the value and the price. Moving away, with all due respect to procurement process, but there has to be a little bit more, because you've got to connect not only the production, you've got your operations, and then you've got your engineers and design. EV is going to be a huge disruptor because they're different parts and different cars, and there's going to be a whole new set of challenges there. So it's going to evolve and I think change us all.
Yeah, absolutely. Matt or Maxim, would either of you have either of you seen particular innovations or been working through any that you?
I would just say the total landed cost. I think that's what you're talking about. I mean, that is so important, because it's not just price, because you can get price and have something that's twice as long of a lead time or inconsistent deliveries. But so it's that total landed cost is always very important. Innovation-wise, we've been looking. Again, I've been in my job for 2 months, but jumping into this nightmare, and I've been involved with it obviously a long time, but visibility to where our things were. On a boat, in a port, on a train, knowing where it is and having some type of predictability to when it's going to come in. I found most of my team, because people were looking for information every day. We have all kinds of different ERP systems that we're dealing with. I had people manually trying to look at 300 containers. Okay, where is that? Okay, to do that, somebody was manually looking up. Okay, this thing going onto a system. And doing, it was taking 5-6 hours a day, every day, to just tell somebody it's still on a boat.
Yeah, and you're pulling that information rather than
and it's so hard. So
right.
it's, but one of the things that I've found that has come available is digital visibility tools. And there's a couple of them that are your sponsors here, 8 Things and P44. 2 very capable, and there's probably more, but those are some that I'm familiar with. But we've recently gone out and looked at those and made an evaluation, and we've made a decision on that. But so there are new technologies, and once I get that implemented, I won't have to have somebody every day looking at all these things. I'll have something that gives. I'll know where it's at. It doesn't necessarily. It tells me that it's stuck in LA and there's 70 ships in front of me. But at least I know where it's at, and there's some predictability based on other people using the same tool, how long their containers are coming off. That should give me some more predictability that's more accurate than I would have just trying to guess on my own. So I think there are tools that are coming out there that are pretty innovative and creative and new.
Yeah, maybe a few words from my side. So first of all, I think that our service providers are supporting us strongly and during the crisis. But I kind of would like to go back to basis when we're talking about innovation during these times. So because in the end of the day, everything we expect from the service providers is deliveries according to original ATA. So equipment availability, accurate tracking, reliable information, solution management, proactive approach, accurate invoicing, efficient claim management. So if we are every time efficient in these areas, probably not. So I hope that we are improving in these basic things, and as mentioned, so at the moment I think there is a good opportunity for the service providers to invest in the process improvement.
Just on that, Maxim, do you, and I'm sure you do, but how would you think within Benteler and the supply chain team, are you also working with your team to improve what you can do on that side, so to speak? I mean, I appreciate the logistics providers need to make the transport and this, but they can probably do it as well as the information that they have and things like that. So do you think that there's being efforts made from both sides, if you like, to ensure that?
Definitely. So as I mentioned, so with the service providers, we are working in order to provide reliable information, right? Because I think this is crucial. So right now, when we have the lack of capacity, so service providers are requesting long horizon of our forecast. So, and we are trying to stick to the forecast. Second, what we cannot afford is inefficiencies right now. So we cannot afford low container utilization or low truck utilization. So we have to work on that. We cannot afford demurrage cost. So we have enough cost right now, so in order to carry this kind of extra cost. So I think.
Yeah.
And so of course during the crisis time we are improving significantly the processes, but obviously we are not a freight company, we are a production company, so we have other priorities, and therefore we're relying on the service providers that the service is up to standard. Yeah.
Matt, you've also worked serving on the aftermarket side before at previous companies, but with First Brands now, I think it's quite a multi-channel, omnichannel network, if I understand it. Whether going through Amazon, through smaller retailers, dealers, etc. Is that kind of pointing to some new innovations from your side as well, in terms of, okay, we need to move with the Amazons of the world. We need to have that variability, flexibility, information flow. Does that force you to be better at your supply chain too?
It's going to force us to be better. Again, I'm pretty new.
But, I can't believe you didn't fix it after 2 months.
But we do service, everybody, right? Having 2 filter companies and wiper companies and friction companies. So we are servicing just about every channel that there is. So we have to have different systems and flexibility. So I think our challenge right now is more inside of our operations. And how do we get standard ERP systems and standard transportation systems and getting TMS systems in place and other basic inside the 4 walls things to be able then to go out and offer things. But we are looking at things on the outside, but I think it's still relatively new. The customers oftentimes, I think, push things on us that force us to have innovations. And when you have that, that helps you maybe sometimes carry that over to others. But I'm still too new at it to probably give you a fair answer on that.
Understood. We'll follow up on that. Well, just maybe one more. I mean, this question is so important. It's been asked twice, I think. Does localization of suppliers present other risks, such as labor shortages? Just if anybody would think. I mean, clearly that perhaps goes beyond some scope in logistics, but we talked to truck driver shortages. The issue doesn't just get solved, I suppose, when you move it locally. Is that part of the consideration, or will that be part of the consideration in the localization process as well? If anybody wants to comment on
I would just say, as somebody that has a large distribution network, and we're struggling finding labor. As we have brought companies together and you try to consolidate companies into an area, I know it's very challenging to find that labor pool. And you do it with incentives, you do it with longer term pay, attendance. You're doing a lot of things to keep it going, but it's very challenging. I know as we're bringing, recently we've bought, I've been in some meetings where we brought new material into Mexico, and it's very difficult to find labor and keep labor.
Yeah, it's happening on the West Coast as well. I mean, it's an ongoing challenge, I think, based on our new reality. So, some of the warehouses and so forth that are having trouble sourcing local staffing, we're endeavoring to automate further along the way, if where we can, to help alleviate that.
You look at the restaurants. Half the restaurants you go to, even a fast food restaurant, and they're not open to go inside because they can't get staff. So it's everywhere.
No, so in California, $20 an hour, and they can't get people to the fast food restaurants. So.
Well, we can talk about the UK if you'd like. And then you'll feel a bit better about yourself at least. We're running low on time, and maybe the last question. Let's not look too far in the future. Maxim made it clear back to basics is the theme, and it could be that back to basics is the answer here as well. But you know, looking in 2022, do you see your priorities in the supply chain exactly as they are right now, just kind of getting through, surviving, or would you put some others up there too? Matt, I mean, we talked about some of the changes in the network you're looking at, but Maxim, I'll start with you there.
Well, I really hope that the shock phase is already in the past. So the shock phase was in the beginning of this year when we were trying to adjust to the new reality. So somehow we are now back to normal in the new environment. Hopefully the worst is in the past. So and we can go back and somehow work on the continuous improvement, work on the work on the changes. However, in general, and this is what we just discussed today with one of our service providers, so we are not expecting that the situation will be significantly better. So hopefully the shipping lines will add more capacity on the market, and we will get a little bit of relief. But overall, I think, especially in the upcoming months, the situation will not change. So there is a holiday season comes, and then the Chinese New Year comes, and then something else will come. So situation is difficult, probably will remain difficult next year. So I think we as a team have to stay strong, flexible, trying to mitigate the risk, work on the cost reduction, and do whatever we can to satisfy the customer requirements.
Absolutely. So Matt, would you add anything to that?
I do think the pain we're in is going to continue. Hopefully it gets less and less, but I do think it's going to continue. I don't think it's going to go back anywhere close to what it was. I think there'll be a new reality, but I think even the situation is difficult and as challenging as it is. And I think there's a lot of peers and other companies that are in the same boat. Now is also a great opportunity to just be aggressive. And how do you take advantage of this disruption and say, you know, I can get a little bit more each week, and can I get that? And because customers are asking us for material, and we're struggling in some cases providing it in the timeliness that we want. But there's a lot of other customers that we typically don't sell that are coming to us as well. So if I can get enough and buy enough ahead and take advantage of this time, maybe I can start getting market share out of the situation and continue to grow the business. So we're taking a very aggressive approach on how we were trying to solve this. And if it gets better, great. If it's not, I think we're going to be aggressive. I caution there's a whipsaw that maybe is out there, but that might come back and get us if it does go the other direction. But right now, it's full throttle, and how do we get more quicker, faster, and cheaper?
And points well taken. Billing, claims, I mean, doing the basics, we need to do those things. And he's right, the pendulum is inevitably going to go back the other way. From representing the commercial arm of Automotive for Maersk in North America, what we see coming is long-term contracts with our clients. We didn't play the spot market. We didn't go and take advantage of that. Long-term contracts on the ocean side to support the current client base, and the 100% of our thrust is going to be on working collaboratively with clients on the logistics and supply chain portfolio to help overcome the things that are going on right now. And that creates a real challenge because the capacity still is constrained, but there are alternative modes and other things that we hope to collaborate and work on to get our partners through it.
Well, I think you heard it there. It's a realistic picture. We don't expect that next year is magically going to get better, but hopefully some good positives come on the horizon, lots of lessons learned, some really key basics to address, but also I think we kind of know the areas where the improvements can come, whether it's in that visibility and that collaboration. So I want to thank the panel for these insights and speaking openly with our audience, both in the room and those watching, of course, online. So thank you very much to all of you.
Thank you. Thank you.